I'm John Travis on August 2nd in Novato, California, talking to Dan Bollinger in West Lafayette, Indiana. And I've known you for what, 30 some years now, and just paid a visit to your home, your beautiful home in overlooking the Wabash River, and came back to California and we set up this interview. So let's start with where you were born and siblings and early childhood influences that led you to the career path that you followed in this particular topic of circumcision. Many other careers that we'll mention too.
Okay, let's start with my name is pronounced Bollinger.
Oh, sorry. I
That's
never have to
okay.
pronounce it. I just see it.
Right. Um, so yeah, I was born and bred in Indiana, Hoosier all my life. I'm still living in Indiana. I came down to Purdue University to go to school and never left. And my wife and I now have a house on the Wabash River. Been together for many years. In fact, we coming up on 34 years right now. So and then my background, I have a degree in industrial design and a minor in psychology. So I got started, as I like to say, I have a couple of different stories. One of them is uh, one word, involuntarily. I was circumcised when I was 3 days old, presumably against my wishes. I don't recall. Um, I know my mother said that the nurse just came into the room, picked me up, and started walking down the hall. And she asked, "Where are you taking my son?" And she said over her shoulder without stopping to get circumcised. And that was it. And I really didn't think about the issue at all about being circumcised. I think at one time I even convinced myself I wasn't. I don't know. But I started doing well, with my wife, some sort of couples and personal growth workshops, and eventually did some men's work, some men's workshops, and that led to me thinking more about men's issues. And as I turned about 50, I wanted to get working on some sort of men's issue, and there's so many out there. But I knew in order to stick with one, I'd have to have you know, in this case, skin in the game, which was the
No pun intended.
anti-circumcision or pro-intact um, movement. And I've been doing that for 25 years, maybe 30.
Yeah, we met 25 years ago in Sydney. I don't think we actually met before then. The national international conference. Well, back to we've got you born and over the nurse's shoulder going to get circumcised, but let's hear a little more about your childhood and what your relationships were like with your mother, your dad, siblings. What shaped your activism?
Well, that's a big time frame. So childhood wise, um, we let's see, how would I say? So I was born in a small town of Plymouth, Indiana, county seat for Marshall County. And at the time, it was the largest city in the county, which was about 3,600 people. And it was the same town my mother and father and all four of my grandparents were born and raised in. Um, and, I have some Amish roots on one side of my family. Uh, and it was pretty much just more or less a childhood based on moving around a little bit and eventually building a house out in the country on the family homestead. And my
Your
dad
parents
was,
built the house, or
yeah, we built the house eventually.
and
And
were you firstborn?
I'm sorry.
Are you firstborn?
Uh, okay, let's get to that. So my mother had two boys from a previous marriage. And so all told, she had 7 kids.
Wow.
So in that, and the birth order is interesting. Um, so I was her third child. However, that's not how it works. Not according to Alfred Adler, who was a psychologist who created the whole concept of birth order. And he says it's not about numbers, it's about how you think about your child, your family, including the age gaps and where you slept in relationship to where your parents slept. So it turns out, after I did a lifestyle analysis at the Adler School of Psychology in Chicago, that they said, oh, guess what? You're, you're a second born. My oldest brother's 9 years older, and he only lived with us when I was up until junior high. And he was actually more of an uncle figure to me because I would go to him if I had problems. And so, really, I was the second born. And then the youngest of my family, my sister, there's such a large age gap, and she was so young that really, to me, my family was myself and 4 other siblings, and I was second born. So figure that one out.
How much younger is the youngest sister than you?
Oh, 8 or 9 years.
Uh-huh. And what was your relationship like with the newly defined firstborn, your mother's second?
Very good. He was 4 years older than me. So sometimes I was in his way, and sometimes I was a tag along. Um, that improved after about the time he graduated or came back from Vietnam, and we hung out a lot more after that. Um, but our relationship with him, my relationship with him, my half brother, was very good.
Uh-huh. And did you have a relationship with your mother's first husband, the father of?
No, I only met him once or twice, even though he lived in town.
Uh-huh. So after you, there's how many more? Three more?
After me, two brothers, 2 sisters.
And you were more like the older brother to them, I'm guessing. And what was that relationship like? Did they get along well with you and each other?
Uh, Off and on. One of the issues there was, well, two things. One, my next youngest brother, who was always a little taller and a little more mature than me, and we were mistaken as twins all the time.
Oh,
And also we looked alike. Um, but then when my oldest brother moved in order to finish high school at a different school, I then became the oldest in child in the family. So then I was the de facto babysitter, and which meant I had to tell all my siblings what to do, when to do, fix them lunch because we'd walk home from school. And so more or less they resented that, being told what to do by me. Um, Not so much now, but they did then.
how did you feel about it at the time?
Oh, I didn't particularly like it, but it's not like I had a choice. That was the way it is. Just do it.
And how much younger is the brother right after you, the twin?
Oh, only about 16 months.
Uh-huh. Did you have any sibling rivalry feelings with him suddenly moving in on you? Do you remember?
There was no moving in on.
I mean, being born, he took a big hunk of your
Oh,
mother's attention.
oh, feelings of being, what's that? Dethroned?
Yeah,
No, absolutely not.
interesting. 'Cause I have a sister 2.5 years younger and a brother 5 years younger. That horrible 2.5 years age gap, which there's books written about why it's the worst possible spacing for siblings. The normal human spacing is 5 years uh, with full-term breastfeeding. It normally keeps the mother infertile. But we fought like hellions. And so the fact that you got along well with a 16-month younger, I guess being de facto twins made a difference. But
Mhm.
um, so you went off to school at age 6 or so, or kindergarten. I don't know what your schooling was like in Plymouth. Small school, I ma imagine.
Yeah, small school system. Although, um, let's see, yeah, went to kindergarten and then elementary school. Um, um, Most of the time rode the bus because we lived in the country or just outside of town. Um, Moved away to the little town of Bremen, which was in the same county. Um, Large Amish population. To give you an idea, downtown they had a parking lot for cars and then a hitching lot for horse and buggies. And so it was real common. And I grew up with Burkholders and Yoders and all sorts. In fact, the School of Bremen, the elementary school had a requirement that at every age, one of the teachers had to be German English speaker.
Ah,
I don't know exactly how. I think it was at the time the only multilingual school in Indiana. I forget. There's some sort of uniqueness about that.
interesting. Well, I
Mhm.
grew up in Bluffton, Ohio with Yoders and Burkholders and Bodichers and Amstutzes and all them, but they were more First Mennonites who passed for normal, except they couldn't drink and smoke. They'd line up the city street at Bluffton College where they could smoke on the street, and the police chief was worried he was going to have a accident with all these kids lined up smoking. Uh, it was a whole different experience. There were like 46 of us graduated from high school. How big was your class?
222.
Oh, big time.
Well, see, it was busted in from most of the county.
Right, right. Yeah, we were still in
There
a,
were only three high schools in the county at the
uh-huh.
time, and it was the largest.
So how did you
Six,
do in grade school? Were you a teacher's pet or a loner like me, or what was your role in your class?
well, I don't remember elementary school in that regard. Uh, we all seemed to be the same to me.
Uh-huh.
Um, High school was a different deal. But I did fit in very well. Part of the reason is I lived so far away and had no way to get into town for any sort of sports or social. The only thing I did was senior play. I did sound and special
Well,
effects
I did
um,
that the same thing.
for lighting, and that was it. That's the only activity I did, which was so. So I didn't have a lot of socialization. I did poorly in high school, and then turned right around, went to college, and just got straight A's. So it
Oh.
was a case of purely on my part is being interested or bored to death. I remember the first day of high school thinking, oh my God, I have to do this for 4 years. And when you're that age, 4 years is a lifetime.
Yeah,
I just hated high school.
but you got to Purdue and things turned around. What was your major?
At the time, it was engineering, but then, the big schools, I have um, dropout or test out classes. And I didn't do well in calculus. I did extremely well. I took 4 years of mathematics, trigonometry, algebra in high school, did really well in those. But when I hit calculus, it was like a brick wall. I even took it over again in a summer class, did not deal any better. And so I dropped out of engineering and went into industrial illustration, which is a 2-year degree, and just aced that. And then I got a job at the university being an illustrator and draftsperson for the engineering department of all
Ah,
places. And shortly after that, um, a professor said, "Hey, we have over in the art and design program a workshop, and we'd like to have it open in the evening, but it must have a university employee as a monitor." And I said, "I'm your man because I could use the equipment while I'm monitoring." It was a win-win. I did it for
yeah.
free. And then eventually, when they moved and they built a new, larger workshop, and we're talking wood, metal, plastics, welding, casting, the whole bit, everything. Um, the professor in charge of industrial design said, "Hey, I want you to be the they call them laboratory technicians." So he wrote the job description so only I would qualify. And I got the job and did that for 10 years. And then eventually, and then went part-time and got my industrial design degree.
Fascinating. And were you single at this time, relationship wise? What's on the scene
Uh,
there?
Shortly after I got to school, I got married. We were both real young. It lasted 5 years, no kids. Um, it was both a case of we both kind of, I think, in the end, just kind of needed to bootstrap ourselves socially and maturity wise. So I don't regret it, but it was like way too young.
Practice marriage.
Yeah, if you want to put a good spin on it, that'll
I mean,
do. At
my
least it
daughter,
was amicable, and stayed in contact with my ex, all my exes. So that was nice. And then I was single for 10 years, 12 years.
during
But
the
I was
time,
living on campus, so it was all right.
uh-huh. And how do you see this relating to your activism now? And when did that begin? And
Well, like I said, I got started doing so-called men's worth and mythopoetic work. John Lee, Robert Bly, Sam Keen, all of those folks, Jed Diamond. And, I met most of those guys over the years. And at one point I go, yeah, I'm feeling fairly put back together, feeling like I'm comfortable as a man in my own skin. And so I wanted to get involved in men's work, sort of I want to give back. And that's when I picked circumcision.
what brought you aware of the men's issues and the first step? That's a big jump for an engineer.
Designer. I'm a designer, not an engineer.
Oh, okay. And I thought that engineering was included in that, but no.
Most design schools are in the art department, humanities.
Oh, okay. I thought you said design engineering, or you
No, I
combined the word,
started in engineering
right?
and dropped out, quit, transferred actually, and then eventually ended up in the art and design department, industrial design.
Oh, industrial. I was collapsing industrial with engineering. Okay, now I get.
Right. A lot of people get that,
Yeah.
but I have an art degree.
Uh-huh. And so this men's business, where did you just stumble on it, or what? And when was this?
Oh,
80s or
let's see, when was it? 80s, 90s. It would have been the early 90s. Well, like I said, I did a lot of um, weekend workshops and then started facilitating at some of them. So I was comfortable, and I'd been teaching at Purdue for a long time as a part-time instructor, so I was comfortable in front of a class. And one came along with there was a fellow who was teaching one of these courses and said, I want to do a men's weekend workshop. It was a fellow by the name of Skip Swice from Austin, Texas. And he developed a course and he and I taught it for many years. We had, oh, I don't know, five, six, 700 students all told, taught the course around the country. And so that was the first taste into it. And then I just kind of went on from there.
Uh-huh. And then how did you happen to pick circumcision as your focus after you got into that?
Well, like I said, it was the only men's issue I could personally relate to.
Oh,
Um, I, I didn't have trouble with the justice system, or I didn't have, dealing with alimony or child support or child visitation. I didn't have any problems with the military because I wasn't in the military. Um, and so, all of those things are valid men's issues, but it didn't apply to me.
right. And
I had no personal stake in it.
you would have been of draft age with Vietnam War, wouldn't you? How did you avoid that disaster?
Um, well, avoid isn't quite the right word. I was in the lottery.
Oh, okay.
And so it was a matter of you go or you don't go. It was it wasn't really avoiding. It's just like you're staying, you're going. Um, so and if my number had been called, I would have gone. I would not have liked it, but I already had a brother who just came back from Nam. Um, my next younger brother was the very next year and enlisted in the army. Ended up doing his tour in Germany. My father and grandfather were in World War II and one, respectively. Um, I have I have family members who were in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So we
Wow.
were all citizens. None of us were career military, but it's like every generation served at one point or another. So if I'd been called up, I would have gone. And interestingly, um, my number was 151. In my county, they had drawn the number up to 149,
Wow.
and there was no one in my county who was born on the date for 149. So if there was a call up of any size, even a small one, I would have gone. So I was waiting on, I was in school at Purdue and just kind of waiting with bated breath the whole semester to see if I was going to go to Vietnam. I had already gone through the selective service um, examination where they bused us to South Side Chicago and we did physical exams and I did tests and they pulled me aside. And out of the hundreds they did today, they pulled up about a dozen of us aside and gave us this spiel of um, let's see, what is it called? Officers Training
Yeah.
School, OTC.
Yeah.
Um, so apparently I did well on some of the tests. And so if I'd been drafted, I would have gone right into OTC and then shipped to Nam as a second lieutenant. And if I'd been put into combat, second lieutenants had, as I recall, the worst survivability rate of any rank.
From the what was the term they used? Not fragging,
Yeah, fragging.
but it was there's a term for killing your own officers, I thought.
It's fragging, as in one of your subordinates would just toss a grenade in your lap.
Wow. So what are your thoughts retrospectively on the whole were you pro or anti at the time? Were you involved
I
in
was I was 19. I have no idea, where I was politically on that, except, I was following the news and that was about it. I knew I didn't particularly want to go. I didn't want to go into combat, that's for sure. Um, but that's where I would have ended up.
Yeah.
Um, I would have been in the last days of Saigon situation. Um, so it just never dawned on me. It wasn't until later that I realized that I kind of escaped or perhaps avoided, as you say, that ordeal, which I may not have survived.
Yeah, likely.
Mm.
So let's see, where are we? You're single and you're teaching, and you've been doing. Then you started doing this men's work with your colleague. Um, what was your day job during that time? Were you still at the university, or?
Well, actually, when I was doing the workshops, I was married to Rebecca.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we did a lot of those workshops together. And then until I started the ones for, men's work. Um, and right out of school, I started my own design consultancy. I put myself through school partly by working full time at the university, going to school half time, and then also doing some model making, pattern making for industrial designers in the state because I was somewhat connected with them all. And so I did models, and it was all corporate work, so it paid really well. And I would use my university shop in the evenings and weekends to do this. So I had no overhead. It was all profit. So it was very nice. And then as soon as I got out of school, I opened my own design consultancy, had a few, two major clients, a couple little ones. Um, and in that process is how I met um, my wife, Rebecca, because she was part owner in um, for one of my clients. And then eventually we started dating.
Oh, fascinating. And then this led to your building your own machine shop in the basement, which I was astounded when I first saw it. Like, wow, the
Well,
equipment that you've got down there.
well, yeah, I had to start building my own model shop and workshop um, for my own career, but also just because I like to build things. And so I've just kept on with that um, model shop. So as my grandkids like to say, I can build anything. I don't I don't correct them, but I just like to hear them say that.
So
Uh, and I still do that. I still do whatever it is, make things for work, make things for myself, make things for the movement. Um, and so that's also one of the ways I contribute.
I thought that was your phone beeping, but it's mine. The battery's low, so stop that annoying but beeping. So the first steps in getting involved in the circumcision issue, what did you do when you identified that was where you wanted to have, in this case, no skin in the game, but uh, bad pun, but
But an appropriate one. So, I mean, I have literally skin in the game. So, so that's a tricky one. I started researching circumcision, and it had come up with some of the men's groups, men issues. So I started researching it, found two groups, No Harm and No Circ, uh, and they had, rudimentary websites. But then this was 1995, and they were all rather rudimentary at that point, and but full of information. I liked No Harm because it was run by a guy and had a male focus. But he had really no activity, no activism per se. And the other one was No Circ, which was run by Marilyn Milos, a nurse, and had kind of this mommy and medical focus, which didn't really help me at all, but they were very active. So I got involved with them on the side, but I also was involved with attorneys for the rights of the child, doctors opposing circumcision, and I started for work. I was doing my own website, hand coding a lot of the HTML, and so I was for a while I was helping out as assistant webmaster for all of these organizations. I had access to 5 or 6 Intactivist organization websites. So I could go in and do this, add this. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Wasn't
one
that
of the
fun
ways.
and coding in HTML in the good old days?
Yeah, and I still do. Um, and then I got involved with, let's, let's see, at one point, about 97 is when I started contributing online. There were bulletin board services and email lists or list serves.
Right.
One of them was Intact-L. Got active and started getting to know Intactivists from all around the country, and then started going to the meetings. My first face-to-face was I flew halfway around the world to Sydney, Australia for that symposium, and finally got to meet, a bunch of people, and then got involved. And every time there was some sort of event, there would always be a little strategy meeting. And by then I was director of the Intact International Coalition for Genital Integrity, or ICGI. And all of us directors tried to get together to strategize. Every single one of these meetings, I said, if we want the movement to grow, we have to combine forces. We have to have one big organization, not a lot of little ones. And every single one of them balked at that. They didn't want to give up their power, or they said, no, lots of organizations make us seem big. And I said, you're not big when you're one person with a home office. That's not big. No matter how many of you are, it's still a lot of small organizations. And it says all you have to do is look at the look at what's successful. And I would use National Organization of Women as a case where the women's movement went grassroots to corporate in a big way. And they were and are successful. But still, deaf ears. And eventually I got my wish because at some point at a meeting in San Francisco, I met Georgianne Chapin. I told her about this, and she was in corporate healthcare at the time, and she understood the advantages of one big organization with resources and a staff. And so we started working towards that, and that's how Intact America was born.
Interesting. I didn't realize that. So it was your baby and she picked up the ball and the two of you ran with it. Ah,
Yeah, at one point we were sitting in Terrytown at a conference room, and including an angel donor who was there, who was really interested in this new organization. It hadn't even been named yet. At that meeting, I suggested Intact America. Everyone loved it. And so they picked it. And then the angel donor said, well, I'm willing to give $1 million to get us started, but only if Georgianne Chapin is the director. He looked around the room at everyone, and he owns a huge corporation himself. So he looked around for talent, and he saw that in Georgianne Chapin. I would have done it, but I didn't have the skills, not that level.
yeah.
And there were other people who would have and did hold up their hands, throw their hat in the ring, but he wanted Georgianne or no one at all. So that's how it happened. And then I stayed on to help with strategy. And then eventually, when we created a board, uh, she I was the first board member, and I'm the vice chair.
Interesting. So it's what's fascinating is that two women have risen to pretty high in the ranks. Marilyn, who roped me into it, 96, I was at the uh, pre and perinatal conference in San Francisco, and she lured me into the whole issue, and um, then Georgianne. So um, it's fascinating how they've been able to make a lot of waves. And you as a an activist, and you showed me your one of your what do you call it, position papers.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that for a few minutes, because that's yeah, there we go. Um,
There you go.
really polished, beautiful piece of work. I
Thank
was
you.
impressed. And you're sending those out to all kinds of influencers and decision makers, and you getting any response?
Uh, no, but it's early days.
Uh-huh.
But luckily, no returns. So that's good. Um, the Yeah, how that came about was um, last October, I was interviewed by Jonathan Allen, who's an author of a book about the circumcision issue. And then he decided he wanted to write a book about the circumcision uh, movement itself, the people, much like this conversation. And he wanted to write a book about intactivism. And so he interviewed me and he was saying, so what do you, at the end of the interview, he said, so what do you think are the next steps for the movement? And without thinking, I just said, we're ripe for policy change. I hadn't thought about that. It just came into my mind. It was just bam, it was there. It was so strange. And I hadn't thought about it consciously. But you see, Intact America's goal was to create a tipping point by um, advocating for the movement, at the same time measuring public opinion over the years. And during Intact America's tenure, that raised from 10% to 28% of Americans believe all boys should remain intact. And so that qualifies in social change as a tipping point. It's not 50% like a lot of people assume. Um, and so that's when conditions are right for policy change. So when he said, what do you think are next step? And they said policy change. And it's like, oh man, but then we got to do something. And Intact America wasn't ready. They were in the middle of a couple of big projects and ready to take that on. And because they've been all about advocacy, not activism. And so I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I've done a lot of writing over the years, gotten better at writing since high school English. And so I said, policy papers are what policymakers expect to see. You can send them a letter, you can get on a phone call, you can meet them in person. All of those things are nice, but what they want is a policy brief in their hands. And that's de rigueur, that's the expectation. So I said, that's it, I'm going to write a multitude of policy papers, each one on a little segment of the movement, not on the whole thing. They don't want an essay, they don't want a book. They want a couple of pages on one
Hmm.
topic. And so that's what I'm doing. I have like a dozen topics, and I've mailed out the first set, which is on the one I just showed you. Solicitation of newborn circumcision as a violation of the federal anti-kickback statute. So I'm sending that just to Medicaid directors and state attorney generals. Sorry, state attorneys general.
Yeah. And how did you ever find out about this law that I'd never heard of, and probably they haven't either?
Well, the attorneys general have.
Yeah.
Um, that's for sure. I ran across it back in 2012. I mentioned it to Georgianne, who is an attorney, and she goes, "No, it doesn't qualify." And so I said, "Okay, you're the attorney," and I didn't think about it until I ran across it a few last year, and I started thinking, and I started doing some research, and it does apply or can apply. The precedents for that have expanded in scope, case by case. So now it's now just no longer about getting kickbacks from physician referrals. It's now anything where there's uh, a doctor or nurse or hospital does anything where they benefit financially from something that is disreputable or simply unnecessary billing. And so I make that case. Whether it get traction or not, one thing for sure is right now 125 people are scratching their heads, and I planted a seed in their minds. In a month, they're going to get another policy paper from me, and that's going to remind them. And I'm just going to keep nibbling away at them. It's kind of yeoman's duty, but I can do that.
What's the next topic you'll address?
Um, the one that's at the printers now is request to unbundle the billing codes for medical circumcision from managed care organizations that are sending the bills to Medicaid.
Uh-huh.
Medicaid used to look at all of the billing codes and write the checks. But then they started contracting, and this is many years ago, with managed care organizations, HMO, PPOs, and they would say, okay, here's a bill for a birth of Jane Doe, and it's one line item. And in there is this is circumcision, sometimes even for girls, but they put the ones for boys in there. So even in states that do no longer officially reimburse for circumcision, are still paying for it.
It's
They
hidden.
just don't know it because it's bundled. So
Interesting.
what this policy paper is, hey, take a look at that and see if these billing codes should be unbundled. And who knows what'll happen. I have a couple more in the works. More research.
Fascinating. Well, I admire your diligence and cleverness to come at it. I would never have thought of that. Back on the percentage, up to from 10% to 26%, how does that jive with the fact that the circumcision rate is only about 55% now? What accounts for that 45%
Oh,
that
okay. So the public opinion right now is 28%,
oh,
and the 55% circumcision rate you mentioned comes from the National Center for Health Statistics, uh, part of the CDC, part of the HHS, and those hospital discharge um, database is notoriously poor. And so it's somebody in accounting who's checking off circumcision. They don't know the patient. They haven't looked at the patient records. They're just going, it's a boy. I think it was circumcised. They check it. Maybe there's a remit. Maybe it says that he was circumcised. Who knows? Uh, Extremely poor. And everybody knows they're poor. And they stopped doing that. Um, but they're still doing discharge surveys. The thing is that not only is it poor data collection, untrustworthy, it's also only for circumcisions that are performed during the maternity period, the birth of the child. And it's only between the mother being admitted and the mother and child being discharged from the hospital. That's all they're measuring. They don't measure the ones that are done 4 days later in a pediatrician's office or 6 weeks later in an OBGYN's office.
Is that
They're not
common?
measuring that.
Is that pretty common?
More common all the time. It's increasingly common for um, for them to happen. So Intact America does a lot of surveys, and I've been involved with every single one. I usually write them and conduct them. And over the years, we've asked about circumcision, not to find the rate, but so we can correlate circumcision to something else. So we have to know that to make some sort of relationship. But the thing is that we start to collect a little bit of information on the circumcision rate for in these surveys. And when I've compiled them together to a meta study, we found out that it looks like the circumcision rate for the US somewhere around 75, 78%. That's unofficial. That's not great um, survey or statistical data, but it's a whole lot better than these horrid hospital discharge surveys, which are poor and only measure some of the cuttings.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that, so it's a lot worse than it looked. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it's,
Unfortunately for intactivists who think, oh, it was about 80% in the mid 80s, and now, as you think, 55%, we're doing great. No, not so great.
and I'd heard a lot of that number was actually kids imported from Mexico that escaped it from their culture, although likely ones born here would not escape it. So I don't know whether that's another
Well,
confounding
there
factor.
is a racial element. Um, Blacks historically, culturally, did not circumcise, but eventually they started to uptake as they get acculturated, if you will, which is odd. They're already part of the culture, but so their rates have been going up, and now we're starting to see the same thing slowly happening with the Hispanic community because uh, Latinos, Mexicanos, and others, Hispanics generally come from cultures that do not circumcise. But now here they are in the US, and if they're getting, if the births are happening in the hospitals, they're all being asked,
Yeah.
and many are being covered by Medicaid. So it's like, sure, why not? If you're asking, you must be saying you think it's a good idea, and hey, it's free. Okay, fine. It's
Hmm.
really an easy sell.
Yeah. What is it? The average mother is asked 8 times by uh, hospital staff. That's shocking. I read that number.
Yeah, and some even more. But also, what we found out is that it's the first ask that's the most damaging. You
Hmm.
think it was the repeated acts asking for solicitations created a situation where they just give up and say yes? That's not the truth. First person asked, which is usually a doctor, and just the fact that they're asking to most mothers, that means they're prescribing or suggesting. And the doctor's asking because that's what they're supposed to do, not realizing that some of them not realizing that they're actually doing a hard sell on this, young mother.
Hmm. Was pretty vulnerable at that stage too, with the fetal hormones and everything else, the stress of the
Oh,
birth.
and sometimes they're still under the influence of epidurals.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the situation in the hospitals. So that's the reason I'm focusing on unbundling and solicitation.
Yeah.
Um,
Going at it from the business end.
yeah.
So, any more personal angles from your choice to do this work, and how many hours you must be putting into this. It's like a half-time job, or would you say it's?
I I don't, it's not like I keep track or have a schedule, but I would say I put in conservatively 2 hours a day, every day for the last 25 years.
Oh,
So yeah, it's a side gig, part-time job,
hmm.
unpaid. Well, in fact, I'm a donor. I'm
Yeah.
one of the major donors for Intact America.
Not
So
to mention
it's not paid at all.
funding the current project, probably yourself. Is what became of the donor? He was from Texas, wasn't he? That
Mhm.
launched AI. Is he still involved? Has he seen?
He is. He's still involved, which is very pleasant to see. And two things have happened is that, and we're going to see more of this, is two older gentlemen who we never heard of contacted the headquarters of Intact America separately on a couple of years apart and started a relationship, started talking, and then both of them bequeathed a huge amount of their estate to uh, to Intact America.
Wonderful.
And so we expect to see more of that. Of course, you never know when it'll happen, but um, because if you look at it, it makes sense. The four major donors for Intact America are men over the age of 50,
And
which makes a whole lot of sense.
yeah, yeah. Um, Back to personal issues again. Like, how does Rebecca feel about your doing this work? Is she on board or
Well,
support?
no, yeah, she's quite a bit on board. She listens to me, rant and rave, and she's very nice about that. I could ask her. She's right here.
Oh,
Well, anyway, she's been pro intact even before I met her.
oh, good. Yeah.
Well, she was grew up on a farm and then was a nurse, went to nursing school, um, and the whole deal. So she she's been pro intact from day one almost.
Was she horrified like Marilyn was at witnessing a
I,
circumcision?
I don't think she ever did.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe she ever witnessed one. That's not universal in nursing. It's rather universal for physicians
Yeah. Well,
because they have to perform one.
I was on the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation during my third year of medical school, and actually did one under the supervision of the doc, and horrified that at the time I didn't even think much of it. I was so ingrained in the medical model that I look back on that with great regret. And
Well, you weren't very old either. It's sort of like me thinking about going into military service, going into Vietnam. It's
yeah,
like, I don't know. I'm 19. What the heck do I know?
well,
If I get my number, I'm going. If I have to do one, I'll do one. Yeah.
I was 25 at the time, and a
Well,
couple of years
didn't have a
later,
lot of choice at the time because
yeah,
it's more or less a requirement, right? So
yeah, couldn't,
you
uh,
were drafted.
yeah. So I consider you a wellness professional, though you probably don't use that term, but I'm including you in the oral history of wellness and the infant wellness division, which I think is more important than any adult wellness, and circumcision being a major trauma that I think is so unappreciated of how seriously it affects men's lives. And uh, did you know Ray Castellino?
No.
Because he thought he could detect No, I actually conflating him with he could spot a cesarean birth by just watching a man or a woman and was remarkably accurate. But around the same time that I learned that, there were two different women that claimed they could spot a circumcised man by one was something about his mouth and the other was something about his eyes. Have you ever heard that, or do you know who they would be? I lost track of it. I wanted to.
No, and all of that sounds to me, I consider myself a scientist, a little like palm reading. They might have some intuition there. Some people are extremely intuitive when it comes to sensing trauma, early traumas in other people. A lot of psychologists are. So I don't know about that. I have no experience with that. And like I said, I have a minor in psychology, and I did a study and found out that there was a high correlation between newborn circumcision and acquisition of alexithymia, which is the inability to identify and express your emotions. So, in layman's terms, what I discovered was that circumcision cuts men off from their feeling function.
Yeah, yeah,
And and then later on, I found an association between in a study that I did on that doesn't conclude, but it strongly points towards early newborn circumcision as qualifying as an adverse childhood experience and ought to be put on the standard checklist.
yeah. The ACEs 10 points for sure. That would make it 11 unless you could uh, dump one of the other ones. But I thought that was brilliant. I when you first sent me your paper about alexithymia, I had to look up the word because I didn't know what it meant, and um, that was fascinating. But I'm so uh, just overwhelmed by the importance of this and the struggle to make it to bring it into people's awareness for the most part. It's of the various causes I've taken up between that and the massive number of vaccines given to babies. Both are just overwhelming to me that they're right under the radar. Not to mention clamping the cord too soon, so babies are born anemic. They're missing about 20% of their blood supply that should have come from the placenta. Just the brutal things that the medical system is doing that we're going to look back like on this, like bleeding and uh, giving people mercury and you know the things that we've recognized now are not healthy. So
Well, another, I'm reminded when you've been talking, another wellness aspect of from circumcision, and it comes from a study I've done, but there are two or three other studies. They all came to the same conclusion, which is men who are circumcised are between 3, 4, 5 times more likely to acquire erectile dysfunction, which can be physical or psychological or, or both. And not surprising considering that it cuts off, it severs the frenular artery in the penis. So a huge portion of the nerve endings, which ought to be excited during intercourse, are not. And then we're surprised when, they have some sort of problem later on.
yeah, I took a comedy course about 15 years ago in Australia, and one of my jokes was, why do most women fake orgasm? And the answer was because men fake foreplay. And why do men fake foreplay? They don't have the equipment to enjoy it with because they've lost all that intermediate sensory nerve endings that could make for a pleasurable experience. So,
think you need to work on your delivery because that was not funny.
Well, uh, true. It's um, I chose to not pursue my career in comedy, obvious reasons. But so, do you ever use the word wellness in your work? I'm just trying to tie you in here.
I I have not, but now I'm thinking one of my policy papers could be about wellness. Um, Part of it is as soon as I think of there's so many little niche topics with this issue, which is one of its problems. It's so broad,
Yeah,
but it also means there's a lot of opportunities. And so as soon as I think of um, could I write a white paper on this, the very first thing I think about is how can I get the mailing list for the people who need to read it? Because if I can't get the mailing list, then I might as well not do it,
yeah.
you know. Um, and so, I've been lucky I can easily get, I have addresses, mailing addresses for every state Medicaid director, every state attorney general. Those are easy to obtain. It's painstaking, but you can get them. But who would I send it to? Give, give me 100 addresses for wellness.
Well, the problem is the word wellness has been so bastardized and dumbed down that most of what passes for wellness isn't anymore. I'm struggling to keep Halbert Dunn's original definition of high-level wellness in the 50s, which caught my attention, even though I thought wellness was a silly word and would never catch on. When Dan Rather opened his 60 Minutes piece, said wellness, now there's a word you don't hear every day, which was true in 1979. But then it caught on. But unfortunately, it has nothing to do with what I think it should do with the mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of health.
So let me amend my question. Where do I get a mailing list for wellness policy makers? The movers and shakers.
Yeah, I don't even know if there is such a category.
Well, if you don't know, who would?
Uh,
You're the expert.
yeah, well, I'm expert in theory, and the practical world left me behind in the when I shut down my center in 1979,
Sure.
and the illness, I mean the infant wellness dimension, the Alliance for Transforming the Lives of Children, which I took up in '99 for about 10 years. Um, Let me think about that. Yeah. Uh, and they need to be policy makers. So,
So yeah, somebody who would have the authority to make a change. Um,
AHA movement, which I know Doc tried to address the Medicaid funding issue with, what they were trying to go through Elon, who isn't really connected with the Maha, but the um, Del Bigtree, and though he stepped down, but I'm not sure who all is on it. I know Asim Malhotra, the British cardiologist, took over as the medical expert on the group, but I put up my hand back when they were looking for volunteers and didn't hear anything from them. But that would be the most active policymakers, though my sense is they're maybe overwhelmed. And then they had that foolish paper full of errors that got a lot of negative attention. Kennedy would never have allowed that one to go out. You know about that?
no, I don't, but what's the name of the group again? I didn't catch that.
MAHA, it's Make America Healthy Again. It was,
Oh, I see. That's the reason I didn't understand.
yeah.
I've never heard it before.
Well, it's gotten a lot of media attention because it actually was a spinoff from Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign when he realized he wasn't going to make it because they were suing him in every state to try to first keep his name from getting on the ballot and then keep his name from being taken off the ballot. What he really is much better at, and the position he's in as Secretary of Health and Human Services, the the whole organization that had been promoting his presidency switched to Make America Healthy Again, MAHA, and they even have a website. So I think that would be the group, but who are the actual people within it? I know Del Bigtree was on board, but then he had to leave because his activism was too much for the political side of it. Um, yeah, this we're
Well,
we're a
I'm
little off the topic here, but this is
no,
important.
that's okay. Well, RFK Jr. received a copy of my first white paper. Hopefully, it's on his desk right now. Um, so anyway, I would definitely include him for
Yeah,
a white paper on wellness because that is his bailiwick.
yeah. I'm sure he's overwhelmed, but I'm hoping his staff will see it. And
That's why you have staff, right?
he's been getting it from all directions. Man, they're trying to take him out because he's threatening the biggest political donation lobby in the world, with the big pharma going after
Yep.
all of the senators and representatives. They're taking big bucks, including Bernie Sanders, who tried to deny it but caved in and admitted it. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, my
let's on that together. Uh, just to wrap up on you as Dan. Let me make sure I've got it right. It's Bollinger. Bollinger.
yes.
A hard G, but it's a long O. Okay. Um, I did have 2 years of German in college, but didn't encounter your name then. Uh, what uh, what would be your parting words to future generations of people interested in wellness and specifically uh, avoiding torturing baby boys with this horrible procedure?
I don't have one. I'm not the poetic or waxing lyrical about anything. And they're going to find their own way anyway. So I really don't. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but that's what I have to say.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and to visit you in your beautiful space there. I try to arrange a trip through Indiana every few years, primarily to keep up to date with you. Uh,
We feed you very well.
you do, you do. And tours of Purdue. I now know that Amelia Earhart was based there. I had no idea.
Mhm.
Um, you're you're my man. You're my Hoosier. So
Yeah, yeah.
thank you again for all of your work and may it flourish and make some real differences. So I'm going to end the recording.